Hi everyone, welcome to Poetry and Talk. Happy holidays. Poetry and Talk is a new online interviewing platform for poets to share their poetry, background, and inspiration. We're so thankful that you're watching today. We'd also like to invite new poets who are interested in being interviewed on Poetry and Talk to touch base with us. Just send an email to us at poetryandtalk@gmail.com and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. We have a great lineup of poets to bring you into late 2020 and early 2021. So we hope you'll stay connected with us on our Poetry and Talk Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel. We invite poets, we invite poet enthusiasts, all those that like to support the arts, and those that would just like to watch poet interviews as well. We appreciate your support, so please subscribe, like, and share. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Poetry and Talk, and I'd like to welcome our guest poet for today, Sierra Blasko. Sierra, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. So I'm Sierra. I write under the name S.J. Blasko, though, and I'm 21. I'm from Massachusetts, and yeah. So the poem that I picked is actually from an anthology that I put together. The anthology is called There Is Us, and I released it during the beginning of quarantine because I felt really powerless about what I could do, and I put it together, and all the proceeds go to um, COVID-19 relief efforts. So the poem itself is called Walls, and it's sort of about the feeling that I had when I was growing up about not feeling like I was speaking the same language as everyone around me, feeling different, feeling like I didn't quite know how to connect with other people, and sort of coming out of that, but still having a lot of the same um, not super healthy coping mechanisms that I had gone in with or learned while I was in there. So it's called Walls. It's a bit long because I like long poetry, but yes. Walls. There is something about growing up different, feeling wrong, like everyone else had a joke you were not in on, that makes the idea of putting up walls appealing. Because then you can have your own jokes, and the world that you did not understand will not understand you. And for a while, it feels like safety, like victory, like independence. But then the walls of the fort you built of brick and stone and cactus plates when you were a child are suddenly too small, and you are growing and they are not. And how can you? How can you tear down this work of your hands, this home of your heart in a time when no one else could house it? So you crouch and you curl and you pretend that it is fun. You are a giant in a human home, and it is a game to see how much you can move without breaking, tripping, tumbling into the cactus spines. It seemed like a good idea when you were building to let them sneak their way onto the inside, too. A coat rack of sorts to hang things upon. You are a child in hand me downs and socks someone else picked for you, pretending they still fit because you are too afraid to ask for anything new. So you make up games and play them. You make up stories and you say them over and over until the words drilled in your mind are, I like it here, and not, I am scared, I am scared, I am scared. Because what if, after all your dreaming, the world out there isn't any better? What then? What then? What then? So, walls. It's easy to destroy things, but not when they are sentimental, not when they're the only kind of safe you've ever known. And maybe a tornado tears them down, or maybe you do. Maybe you are the tornado and it is you. But when they are gone, you take the splinters and you build dragon wings to carry you because your feet are bloodied from that storm. And maybe you build them just big enough to hide behind because those boards that swore they'd serve you, those branches promising they'd always catch you, those walls that held you back but also held you when it counted. Those walls are rough and painful, but they worked. You take a few and leave the rest behind. They worked. How bad can it be? They worked, these half attempts at safety. You hope that there is a little life left in them because you never say it, but you are scared. You are scared. And don't you see? That means that they are working still.
That's a real honest look, Sierra, into walls. And in this particular case, looking within yourself at how you felt growing up, as you said, feeling a little bit different, and then self-creating, as you said, creating these walls. So it's very penetrating and very honest, a look into yourself and into this self-creation. Um, can you share a little bit more about this with us, Sierra?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I went through high school with chronic Lyme disease, and I still have some of that. And that really, sometimes when I look back, it feels like it stole a lot of years from me that I wish that I had had. And even before that, I didn't feel like I was on the same sort of wavelength as everyone else. I have, I'm actually working on getting a diagnosis for autism because that is something that I believe that I have. Um, and high school, I was undiagnosed for depression, anxiety. There was just a lot of stuff going on, and I didn't really have a lot in me to do anything other than protect myself.
Mm-hmm. And so these walls are a protective mechanism to
Mm-hmm.
kind of like fit in and kind of feel like it's almost like a denial of the truth. Do
Yeah.
you agree with that?
Yeah, it's sort of a it's making it into my choice to not fit in instead of something that I can't control.
Wow, that's very empowering. So you're acknowledging that you were kind of the author, so to speak, of it. And that's very insightful. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with us, because it does take a bit of trust and a bit of faith, to share these parts. So, okay, so when did you write this, Sierra?
Um, I'm not sure. I think I wrote this somewhere in my somewhere in the past couple years. Um, I want to say probably 2019. Um, yeah.
And then you were inspired to kind of move forward with this. You said when the pandemic hit, because you said that you felt, was it helpless?
Yeah, kind of powerless. Like I knew there wasn't anything that I could do to, I can't single-handedly stop the world from collapsing. And um, so I got a bunch of people together. I started the project on social media. Um, and it's this book. It's 226, I believe, pages long. And it's got 35 different creators from all around the world who have poetry and photography and art. And there's a couple short stories and creative nonfiction in there as well. I did all the cover design and the interior layout, and I worked to self-publish it. Yeah, so I'm really proud of that project. And there's actually a second one that I have a proof copy of right here, called Faces to the Sun. And it is another anthology with some of the same people, a lot of new people. There's 45 people in this book, and it's 240 pages. So we've added a couple. Um, and its focus is mental health and mental health awareness, because that's a topic that's really important to me as someone who struggles with depression and anxiety. Yeah, so that's actually releasing this month, and I'm super excited and super proud of it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, Sierra. So both of these are collaborative efforts.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the idea kind of was born out of like the pandemic.
It definitely was.
Mm-hmm.
But I've wanted to do things like this for sort of always. When I was 13, I started um, a magazine with my friends, and I would print it out on my grandfather's printer, and it would just be like doodles and poems, but not really good poems. And so that was something that I've sort of always enjoyed doing. And then during the pandemic, it hit me. I was like, what if I just tried to do it in an actual book? I have publishing experience. I can just see where it goes. And it's gone wonderful, wonderful places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Why did you want to open the show with walls? Do you feel that it is looking in a sense back on where you've been, and now you feel like you're at a different place, so you see the evolution of it, or is it something completely different? What is your take on why you wanted to open the show with that, Sierra?
Yeah, it's a it's a very important piece to me. It holds a very, very special, very important piece of me. And I was looking for a poem that I, wanted to share, because I knew that I was going to be sharing one on here. And I was flipping through. I debated a couple of them. Um, and that one was just like, "Hey, you're gonna read me," and I was like, "Okay." So it just spoke to me today. But yeah, it is about looking back and looking forward, and also acknowledging that there is a present right now when you're not really in either of those spaces, and you can't go back, but you can't you can't rush going forwards, because you have to build the new foundations. So
Mm-hmm. That's interesting insight. So once you acknowledge the walls and you acknowledge that they were self-created, and then you decide to tear down the wall, now you have to set kind of a new foundation and explore like unknown territory.
yeah.
And that's the space you feel like you're kind of in now.
um it's definitely the space I was in when I wrote it. I graduated from high school and I went to college, and my whole world kind of got shaken, as college tends to do to people, and and those walls kind of, there wasn't room for them anymore, because I wanted people to like me, and I wanted to connect with people, and I met friends. I met the person who is now my partner. I met people that I cared about and wanted to open up to, and it just sort of all, it wasn't a conscious effort to take them down. They just kind of fell, and there I was, and I was, clinging to the pieces of them that still felt safe. But knowing that, in a sense, some of them were still holding me back. And I feel like in the year or two since then, I've done a lot of growing, and I'm in a much better place than I was. But looking back, that's still such a formative poem to me, and it really does capture where I was and where I've been and where I want to be, which is, I'm not quite sure yet, but it's not there. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, kind of elaborating on your journey, your poetic journey, and your personal journey, and how they're all kind of intertwined.
yeah.
What are some of the projects that you're working on now, poetically, Sierra? What are some of the subject matters and whatnot? In addition to, I realize that the book that's going to be out.
Yes, so I finished I'm just wrapping up the anthology. I'm getting ready to do another one, actually. There will be an open call for submissions in January or February, as soon as I can, get all of that together. I just, this past June, I believe, published a collection of my own poetry, which I also have here. It's called The Flowers Need Love to Grow Too, and it's sort of a looking back and a mental health, and it's sort of that transition from struggling silently to struggling out loud to addressing the struggle. And right now I'm actually also getting ready to publish a smaller collection, about coming out as a queer identifying Christian, because those are identities that don't often intersect publicly, and a lot of people say can't intersect. And it's really important to me to share my story and my journey, and um, help other people realize that they're not alone, and that it's not, you don't have to pick between your faith and the people that you love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love how you're breaking down so many boundaries and so many walls. That's really beautiful, and you have such a beautiful message. I'm wondering, Sierra, if you can take us to your poetry, kind of like as you started. It sounds like you really you're involved in so many different projects right now, and you mentioned at 13 some of the things that were going on with you in terms of poetry. But like, take us into like how you even began poetry, how it got started, and kind of let us in on all that, if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So ironically, I hated poetry with a burning passion until I was in probably my senior year of high school. Um, I loved reading it. I thought it was super cool. And I had written maybe 2 poems in my life that I enjoyed, that I was like, okay, this is all right. I'm proud of this afterwards. But what I really liked writing was fiction. Um, and then in my junior year of high school, I had an English teacher, wonderful, wonderful man, who taught creative writing. And then I had him again for creative writing, and then I had him again for English. So that was lovely. And he was the one who really, he had us open every class with reading a poem from a collection, 185 of the great poets or something like that. So one person, we would go along the desks, and one person would read a poem every day, and then we would uh, we would talk about it together. He would give us sort of the insight into the culture around the poem. Here's what this little line meant. Here's what this is referring to, because some of you are too young to have that personal lived experience. Um, and then uh, he had us write poems for class, and I am not super happy with the ones that I wrote. But my senior year, I had him again, and he asked if I, along with another girl, would like to be in charge of the literary magazine for the school for that year, because he always picked 2 seniors to do it together. And he was like, I know that you guys will care about it, and we'll try and do it right. And so I got to read a lot of poetry all at once, and really go through that process and choosing which pieces went in and which didn't. And then afterwards, we had a reading where some of the people who had pieces in it would read. And I remember one girl, the girl who I was doing the literary magazine with, was reading her pieces, and she's so talented. She's very, very good. And she read her pieces, and I was standing in the back of the area or sitting or something and listening, and I was like, I I could write that. Like, I could, like, this is just the way that I think on paper. And so writing poetry is something that comes really naturally to me. But when I was younger, I was trying to fit into a structure and sort of twist it into the way that I had heard other poems. I wasn't really writing from myself because I didn't know who I was yet. And so yeah, that's sort of when it started. And then right after right after I realized that, like, oh, I could do this, I would enjoy doing this, I started writing for National Poetry Writing Month in April that year. And I wrote a bunch of poems. And then in June, I published a little tiny 46-page chapbook with 6 poems, all sort of free verse, a couple with rhyming patterns, about fairy tales and sort of retelling fairy tales with a different perspective. Yeah, so that's how I started.
Mm-hmm. That's quite an interesting beginning, because you went kind of from one extreme to the other, where you had really no interest in poetry, and then through one of your teachers being exposed to it, and then through having the position at school that the teacher recommended, and then hearing some others reading their poetry, it kind of helped to shift you into a new direction, a direction you were kind of heading into, but kind of expanding upon the writings that you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, Sierra, that when the professor was instructing you or sharing with you different poets that are pretty well known, and why they were writing like this, and then kind of what this line meant, as you were saying, do you think that influenced you?
Yeah, I think that some of it influenced me in sort of how I was, how I started then using stuff in my own writing, um, and pulling pieces from, you know, pop culture that I was inspired by, or um, doing it with some of my favorite stories and with the fairy tales, drawing from other sources of inspiration and putting those into my own pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So it's.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested if you could share with us, Sierra, some of your poetic process. I'm kind of like a process junkie. I love to find out um, from artists about their process. I just find it so fascinating, and it's just so vast. There's no like one way.
Right.
So what is this like for you? How does it play out for you?
Yeah. So a lot of my poems go and are sort of the first draft gets tweaked a little bit, but that's really the what the final product ends up being like. And yeah, I sit down when I'm feeling like there are too many words inside of me and I need to get some of them out, and I just write and I let it come out of my head. It really gives me a lot more space inside of myself. That's actually the way that I started writing poetry. Once I realized that this was such an effective way to give me more space inside myself, I was like, oh well, I'm never stopping this now. But so a lot of my poems are pretty much what you see is what I put it down in its first or second form. Um, yeah, I do a lot of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds almost like you discovered this or in terms of your process that you kind of feel like word congested. You're like, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff going on inside me and all these things going on. And then so that is kind of like a little like flag to you, like, okay, I now need to write. And then through the process of writing, you're like, wow, this really helped me decompress. It really helped me get all this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a form of self-care for me to take, um, and a way of me exploring my own feelings, because sometimes when they're all jumbled up inside of me, I can't process them as clearly. And then when I put them on paper and I really like try and connect all the pieces and figure out um, where they came from, where they do that, all those sorts of things, it really helps me learn myself better and take care of myself in the ways that I need.
Mm-hmm. So it's self-care and self-discovery for you.
Absolutely, yes.
And when you're in the process, Sarah, of writing, do you feel like you go into a different like headspace or a different kind of like a consciousness space? And if you could elaborate on that?
Absolutely, yes, I do. It's quieter, like the words are coming out, but for a couple minutes, when I'm really deep in writing a piece, that's all that's in my head. It's just silence and the words, and I'm just writing them down on paper. And that's a really nice sort of in tune with myself experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes they're faster and there's more words and they're coming, and I'm putting them down on paper as fast as I can. And sometimes they're a little more jumbled and I have to actually work at them like a knot or a tangled web. And those are the days when I've usually put off writing poetry for a lot longer than I should have. Yeah, but I definitely go into a space where it's just me and the paper.
Mm-hmm. And are you like literally pen and paper, computer, both? What's your preference?
I write a lot of notes, a lot of poems in the notes app on my phone, when I'm on the go, when I just have something that I need to get out. And then I'll usually take those and expand on them or just keep them as they are if I like them. I do a lot of the silence writing where I do feel that space and that connection to myself is pen and paper. And then some of my longer poems where I'm really, I have my first love was fantasy, and I have a lot of inspiration from that. I have a love for weird poems and sort of surrealist poems where you look at it and you're like, that's a interesting analogy, and sort of taking a metaphor and exploring it until there's nothing left in it to explore. And those are the ones that I write a lot of on in Word on my computer.
Well, that's really fascinating, and thank you so much for sharing that. I'm kind of getting a feeling, and let me know if this is correct, that with your great imagination and all these areas that you like to write about, you get very inspired within yourself. Like it does, I don't get the feeling, in other words, like you go out and wherever you go for a walk or with a friend or here, there, work or a store, whatever it is, I get the sense that the world, so to speak, doesn't really give you that much inspiration. It seems like you're just really kind of getting it, like this whole like internal Sierra world that gets really inspired by this and by that and all these other things. Is that correct, or is there some overlap?
Kind of, yeah. There is definitely a piece of that, and I have a lot of stuff always going on inside myself. A lot of my fantasy stories, my novels, are drawn from all in here, and but I do have a real appreciation for going out into the world and sort of finding the little hidden magical corners and putting those in. That's where I draw my inspiration from. When it's just me left alone with myself, I tend to fizzle out. It'll take a while, but I do need that stimulus from the outside world. And likewise, if I spend too much time in the world, I end up sort of losing that connection with myself. So it is a balance that I have to maintain.
Right, balance. That magical hidden area, is that something that you find actually when you're out in the world, or is it actually when you come back within yourself in your writing? I'm interested to kind of know when that actually hits you.
Yeah, no, it definitely hits me when I'm out in the world. Something will catch my eye. It'll be I have a couple poems about the way that I don't know if you've ever been to Cambridge in Massachusetts, but it's um, there aren't telephone wires, and that was such a shock to me because I grew up in more of a rural area, and so the idea that there's just streets and there's just buildings, and then it felt like a maze, and it was so weird. I felt so open and so exposed to the sky, and so I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was like, I have to write about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is a cliche, or do you feel like this has some merit to it? Do you feel that artists kind of like zone in on these things that, like you were saying, there were no wires, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at this, there's no wires, I feel so free, I can see the sky, it's so open, this is great. Do you feel that as an artist you kind of just zone into it, and then other artists do as well, or do you think that's just a little too cliche?
I think that cliches themselves are often come from something that is true, and that's why they are so common. So I don't super like the idea of cliches being bad, but I do think that there is a certain, not necessarily that being an artist tunes you into those things, but if you are a person who is naturally tuned into those things, one of the ways that you process that, and one of the ways that you sort of deepen that connection, is by making art and by writing it. So it is sort of a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like an internal response that anybody could have. But if you're an artist and you're kind of wired that way, you're going to create some art. But you could be in another non-art field and still have that same observation, but not necessarily do something with that.
Yeah.
And as far as your editing, it doesn't sound like you do much editing. Once you have you like kind of the body of a poem or novel or whatever it is you're working on, it seems like that's kind of minimal in terms of editing. Is that correct also?
Yeah, I am a perfectionist. So when I am writing a short story or a novel, that is, I am thinking really hard about all the words that I put on the page before I even get them there. And I do a lot of editing, but it's more of like, is this the right word to convey what I'm trying to convey? Um, it's really polishing it until it is exactly what I had in my mind. And that's the same sort of thing that I do with my poetry. it's more of a refining process and not really a like structural edits. Yeah.
And is there a visual component when you're writing as well? In addition to the words and feelings, is there anything visual going on for you?
Yeah, I get a lot of imagery. It happens more when I'm writing fiction or prose. I do feel like I'm watching the scene play out, and I'm just sort of documenting it. There is definitely a visual element to it.
hmm hmm Tell us, what else about your poetic journey, Sierra, that you haven't shared with us, would you like to share?
Yeah. So I guess that the subjects that I write the most about are the ones that are the most important to me. So I write a lot about religion, about queerness. I write a lot of love poetry since getting together with my partner. Um, I I write a lot about mental health, about chronic illness, and really what that does. And I found a lot of my poems centering around trauma and sort of unintentional or well-intentioned trauma, um, and how the things that people don't know they're doing have that effect on us.
So kind of like self-awareness.
I wouldn't say self-awareness. It's more of a, um, I guess self-awareness. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a better word and I can't come up with it.
But you're trying to introduce, well, first of all, areas that you have an interest with, and then and kind of to broaden that perspective. And I feel also kind of going back and tying into the poem that you read, you kind of want us to tear walls down too, in addition to you doing that and looking at, the obvious benefits of that. And, and through that getting self-empowerment and self-acceptance.
Yeah, I definitely write the poems that I wish that I had had. A lot of the poetry that I choose to share with the world and that I choose to publish and that I choose to put out there are pieces that younger me, I wish she had read. And I wish she had had to hold on to. And a lot of my sort of what I feel called to write um, is sharing the idea that you're not alone, and that this is, it's not always fun, but it makes you you, and you're worth galaxies.
That's beautiful and very beautifully said, Sierra. We still have a few more moments. So let us know something, maybe perhaps more about the book that is in process.
Mm-hmm.
One with the, did it have a sunflower on it? Something.
Yes, Faces to the Sun. Yes, I can show you it again.
Yes. Okay, so when will this be out? And can you just give us a little bit more about that?
Yes, there is. The release date is still tentative, but it should be within the next couple weeks, definitely before 2021. So in the last couple weeks of December. It is going to be on Amazon. There will be a color copy and a black and white copy, because the color copy is so expensive. And I do want to make it affordable for people who can't shell out $30 for a book. Um, and it'll be available. It's already available actually, in ebook form for people who prefer that means of reading it. And it's pay what you can. All the proceeds will be donated to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, BEAM, the Trevor Project, and sort of those organizations that focus on mental health, especially in marginalized communities, and sort of um, taking care of those very real, very human needs. Yes.
Mhm. We're going to need to wrap up the show, Sierra. We'd like to leave you with some closing comments. So how would you like to kind of wrap up the show in your own words?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think that if there's anything I want people to take away from my poetry and from my journey, it's that um, you are worth. I have another poem where there's a line that says, "You are worth a year, a week, a week, a year, a life of gentle tending." And so I just sort of hope that people will be gentle on themselves and take care of what they need, and really, you can't pour from an empty jug, as the saying goes. You need to focus on yourself, and this world is one that is not set up to be kind. And so sort of that being kind in this world and also being kind to yourself is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. That's again beautifully said, and I love the analogy, Sierra, of the jug. You can't, if the jug is empty, then that's what's going to come out. But you're saying to fill yourself up with self-care, and
Yeah.
yes, and it's such a beautiful message and such an empowering message, and that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And also, I'm going to go back to this because no walls, tearing down the walls. As you had said, they're actually are self-created, and to realize that that's kind of like a falsehood, so to speak, and just to love yourself and accept yourself. That's a message I feel like I'm getting also, and then it's okay. Is it that
Yeah.
it's okay? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest poet, and
Thank you for having me.
yes, well, thank you for being here, and we wish you well with all your different projects. They sound so interesting,
Thank you.
and your book coming up, and all the different collaborative efforts, and the ones that are focused on your poetry as well. So we hope you stay in touch with us and let us know how things go.
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you so much, Sierra.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching today from Poetry and Talk. We're grateful for your support. And again, please stay in touch with us on our Facebook page, Poetry and Talk, and our new YouTube channel as well. And be on the lookout for new poet interviews uploaded weekly. Thank you again for watching. Thank you, Sierra, for being our guest poet for today. And we'll talk soon on the next Poetry and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.